act in self-defense to protect himself, or did he have prior prejudice towards blacks and murdered Michael Brown? My name is Onyeti Ogmaka.
I'm Philip Venti.
I'm Lindsay Shove.
I'm Yasmin Yancey.
And this is our presentation. So the three questions today are, who is Michael Brown Jr. and what happened that night? How have people reacted towards the police since the incident? And why are the people that support Officer Wilson called supporters, while people that support Michael Brown are called protesters? Michael Brown Jr. was an 18-year-old boy who was shot by a police officer by the name of Darren Wilson on August 9, 2014. How have people reacted towards the police since the incident? People are developing an attitude towards police force that emphasizes right of authority, whose job is to protect the citizens. It's ironic how it's the police force's job to give people a sense of protection, yet they're the ones that people are afraid of. Why are the supporters that support Officer Wilson called supporters, while people supporting Michael Brown called protesters? Those supporting Michael Brown are called protesters because they disagree with authority. My question for you is that, why must authority/government always be seen in a good light, while those that go against authority are seen as protesters?
I did my section on racial profiling, and my questions are, what is racial profiling? Is it effective for police officers to use to determine innocence or guilt? And do you think that the Ferguson police force uses prejudice against blacks? So racial profiling is a practice used by law enforcement for a specific crime based on a person's race or religion, ethnicity, or national origin. According to the National Institute of Justice, racial profiling can cause multiple problems. Several law enforcement have gone through expensive legislation over civil rights and concerns. And the reason racial profiling is the reason it is a big deal is because it's discriminating other people just based on their looks and stuff, and it's not an effective way to see if someone's innocent or guilty or call them in. And this practice makes police even more challenging for the officers. Before the Michael Brown incident, the Ferguson police had a reputation of segregation. The Washington Post stated that the Ferguson police were twice as likely to arrest African Americans during traffic stops than whites. And in 2013, out of the 611 searches, 562 of those searches were black, compared to the 47 searches that were done on white people. And here's a chart, you can see, of their in 2013 of their traffic stops. So they stopped about 4,635 African Americans, whereas they stopped 689. And the white people actually had way more contraband than the African American, 34% compared to the 21.71%.
Okay, and my question was, from a police officer's perspective, do they have to assume people's guilt to protect themselves from dangerous criminals? And they have an oath of honor, and that is, on my honor, I will never betray my badge, my integrity, my character, or the public trust. I will always have the courage to hold myself and others accountable for our actions, and I will always uphold the Constitution, my community, and the agency I serve. And the police officer's oath of honor states that they will take risks and suffer inconveniences in order to defend the lives of citizens, and that the police officers will work selflessly and not selfishly. And because of this oath that they take, they should not put themselves first and should always assume people's innocence compared to their guilt in order to not make mistakes like Michael Brown's case. And if they always assume that the citizen in question is guilty, then more deaths of innocent people will occur.
Okay. Should people fear law enforcement and cooperate with the police in every situation? What problems might arise in this relationship? So I think people should fear law enforcement and cooperate with the police in every situation. This was a quote said from the article we read by Smith. Even though it might sound harsh and impolitical, here's the bottom line. If you don't want to get shot, tased, pepper sprayed, struck with a baton, or thrown to the ground, just do what I tell you. The government is becoming more powerful, but because of this, we need to cooperate with every situation they are in. But the police officers also need to know when they need to use more power. And then another example is search and seizure, which is the Fourth Amendment, and it's ever-changing because the government has more power. This amendment is becoming more misused, making it easier to search people's houses.
And now for the group discussion. After learning about the situation in Ferguson, Missouri, do you think that Michael Brown was a threat that needed to be stopped with force? Or do you think that the police officers abused their power and unjustly used force to stop the situation that resulted in his death? The police officers abused their power and unjustly used force to stop the situation that resulted in Michael Brown's death because they were eager to use violence. News channels report that Michael Brown was shot a total number of 6 times, twice in the head and 4 times in the arm and leg. That was leg. Instead of shooting the African American teen repeatedly, the officers could have shot him once in an area that would not be fatal. This situation should have not been brought to murder because the teen was not in possession of a dangerous weapon. The moment a suspect submits and stops resisting, the officers must cease use of force, said by Smith. Brown cried to Officer Darren Wilson to not shoot since he is unarmed, but obviously that was ineffective, thus leaving us with an 18-year-old teen boy killed by a police officer abusing his powers and unjustly using force to stop the situation. Are there any questions?
What can we learn from this instance of Michael Brown being shot by a police officer to prevent it from happening again in the future?
We can learn that probably it's best to not try and provoke confrontation with a police officer if we ever were to get into a situation like that. But also, police officers could use equipment that could actually show like what's going on from the time that they arrested someone to the time of anything else, so that it shows us what actually happened instead of having different reports from like a witness or from a police officer and so on and so forth.
We talk about racial profiling that the police or law enforcement might do to a suspect. Do suspects ever profile and have generalizations about police officers? And if so, what effect does that have on a police officer?
I think I think in general, like people sometimes, like if they're getting pulled over by a cop, they kind of see like the cop just like an angry kind of like brute person, and that in some cases could give them like a negative attitude towards the police officer and like kind of like aggravate the police officer and kind of like go back and forth with each other, and it heightens the situation.
Excellent. Let's get a clap here on 3. 1, 2, 3.